Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to explore a perplexing dynamic that often surfaces in relationships. If he craves you, why is he silent? The truth will surprise you. Men's communication patterns, particularly their inclination towards silence, have deep psychological, social, and evolutionary roots. Understanding why a man may remain silent despite craving someone requires looking beyond the surface and into the intricate mechanisms of male emotional expression, or often the lack thereof. From an early age, boys are conditioned to suppress emotions that may be perceived as weak or vulnerable. Society often discourages open emotional expression in men, associating traits such as stoicism, strength, and independence with masculinity. A boy who cries too much may be told to man up. A teenager struggling with heartbreak might hear there are plenty of fish in the sea, rather than being encouraged to process his emotions. This cultural conditioning does not simply vanish in adulthood. Instead, it becomes ingrained in how men navigate their relationships, often leading them to rely on silence rather than risk exposing feelings they have been taught to conceal. A man's silence does not always indicate disinterest or indifference. More often than not, it is an internalized coping mechanism, a defense mechanism designed to shield himself from perceived emotional vulnerability. This can be particularly true in romantic relationships, where attachment and emotional intensity are heightened. When a man craves someone, he may experience a flood of emotions: desire, affection, uncertainty, fear, but lacks the vocabulary or comfort level to express them openly. Instead of speaking, he withdraws, not because he does not feel, but because he feels too much and does not know how to handle it. Silence, for many men, is not just a passive act, it is an act of strategy. It can be a way to maintain control over a situation that feels overwhelming. Expressing deep emotional longing, for example, means exposing oneself to the possibility of rejection. Silence then becomes a form of self-preservation. By saying nothing, a man avoids the risk of appearing too eager, too vulnerable, or too invested, things that, in his mind, could lead to hurt or rejection. This behavior is often reinforced by societal norms that reward emotional detachment in men. The trope of the strong silent type persists in media and culture, subtly reinforcing the idea that restraint is admirable while emotional openness is risky. However, there is also a practical aspect to male silence. Studies in psychology have found that men and women often process emotions differently. Women are generally more inclined to verbalize their emotions, seeking connection through conversation. Men, on the other hand, may process emotions internally, preferring to think through their feelings rather than express them out loud. This difference in processing can create the illusion that a man's silence means he does not care, when in reality, he may be deeply invested in the relationship, but struggling with how to communicate it in a way that feels safe and natural to him. In some cases, a man's silence may also stem from his need to fix things before addressing them. Men are often socialized to take on problem-solving roles, believing that before they can talk about their emotions, they must first understand and resolve them. If a man is facing personal struggles, be it career stress, financial worries, or past emotional wounds, he may feel that discussing his emotions before he has a solution is premature or even counterproductive. He wants to present a version of himself that is stable and reliable, so rather than expressing uncertainty or insecurity, he opts for silence. This tendency can be particularly frustrating in relationships where open communication is key to emotional connection. Women, who are often more comfortable navigating emotional conversations, may misinterpret a man's silence as a lack of interest, when in reality he may be trying to work through his emotions in the only way he knows how, alone. The challenge then is bridging this gap in communication. Understanding that silence does not necessarily mean a lack of feelings is the first step. Encouraging emotional openness in a way that feels safe for both partners is essential. Instead of demanding immediate verbal expressions of emotion, creating an environment where a man feels comfortable sharing at his own pace can be far more effective. This means showing patience, offering reassurance, and understanding that emotional communication is a learned skill, one that many men have not been given the space to develop. Additionally, it is important to recognize that while societal norms play a significant role in shaping male communication patterns, every individual is different. Some men may be naturally more expressive, while others may struggle with verbalizing emotions despite deep feelings of attachment. Adapting communication styles to fit the needs of both partners can help bridge misunderstandings and foster stronger emotional bonds. In the end, a man's silence should not be immediately interpreted as rejection or a lack of emotional depth. Instead, it should be viewed as an opportunity to understand the complexities of male emotional expression. By acknowledging the societal, psychological, and personal factors that contribute to male silence, we can move toward deeper, more meaningful connections built on patience, understanding, and mutual respect. The fear of rejection is one of the most powerful psychological forces influencing human behavior, and for men it often plays a particularly significant role in how they approach relationships and emotional expression. When a man craves someone yet remains silent, it is not necessarily because he lacks feelings or interest. Instead, it may be because the possibility of rejection, real or imagined, is so overwhelming that he chooses to remain silent rather than risk exposing himself to that pain. Rejection is not just about being turned down, it is about the deep emotional consequences that come with it. For many men, particularly those who have been socialized to associate their worth with their ability to be desired, needed, or respected, rejection can feel like a direct assault on their sense of self. It is not simply that they fear hearing no, it is that they fear what no represents. It can feel like confirmation that they are not enough, that they are not strong enough, not successful enough, not desirable enough. This fear can be paralyzing, leading them to adopt silence as a defense mechanism. Men are often conditioned to believe that expressing feelings makes them vulnerable, and vulnerability is often equated with weakness. This is especially true in the context of romantic pursuit, where many men feel the pressure to be confident, in control, and unaffected by emotional ups and downs. To openly admit longing for someone, to express desire without certainty that those feelings will be reciprocated, means exposing themselves to a potential wound that could shake their confidence. Silence, then, becomes a form of self-protection, a way to avoid putting themselves in a position where they might be rejected, and as a result feel diminished. Another element of this fear is past experience. A man who has faced significant rejection in his past, whether in childhood, past relationships, or even friendships, may be particularly hesitant to put himself in a position where he might experience that pain again. Emotional wounds leave scars, and those scars influence future behavior. If a man has been deeply hurt before, he may hesitate to risk that pain again, even when he deeply desires connection. He might think, what if I open up and she doesn't feel the same way? Or what if I make myself vulnerable and she uses that against me? The possibility of emotional exposure outweighs the potential reward, making silence feel like the safer choice. Fear of rejection is also tied to the way men perceive societal expectations around dating and relationships. Many men grow up believing that they are the ones who must make the first move, take the risk, and lead the pursuit. This expectation places an immense burden on them because it means they must constantly gauge the situation, read signals accurately, and determine whether or not their feelings will be welcomed. If they misinterpret a signal or make a move at the wrong time, they risk not only rejection but embarrassment. Silence, then, becomes a way to avoid making a mistake. If he says nothing, he cannot be wrong. If he does not confess his feelings, he cannot be humiliated. Furthermore, the fear of rejection is not always about the immediate situation. Sometimes it is tied to a deeper existential fear, the fear of not being enough. Many men tie their self-worth to external validation, particularly in romantic relationships. If they are rejected, it is not just that they were not the right match for someone. It can feel like proof that they are fundamentally lacking in some way. This is why some men would rather stay silent and hold on to the idea of what could be rather than face the reality of potential rejection. The fantasy remains intact, undamaged by reality. However, this silence often leads to a cycle of frustration, miscommunication, and missed opportunities. The person on the other side may interpret the silence as disinterest, uncertainty, or even indifferent. In reality, the silence is often filled with intense emotion, self-doubt, and overthinking. A man may want nothing more than to reach out, to express his feelings, but the fear of what might happen next holds him back. This internal conflict can lead to prolonged avoidance, passive behavior, and in some cases, self-sabotage. To overcome this fear, it is essential to recognize that rejection is a part of life and not a reflection of one's entire worth. The idea that rejection is something to be feared at all costs is a flawed one. Instead, it should be seen as a natural part of human connection, one that everyone experiences at some point. The more one avoids rejection, the more power it holds over them. Those who accept that rejection is a possibility but do not let it define them are more likely to navigate relationships with confidence and authenticity. Additionally, understanding understanding that relationships are not solely about being chosen, but about mutual compatibility can help reframe the fear of rejection. It is not always about whether someone is good enough, but whether two people align in values, timing, and emotional availability. When men realize that rejection does not mean personal failure, but rather a mismatch in circumstances, it can lessen the emotional weight that rejection carries. Lastly, emotional resilience must be developed through self-awareness and self-worth that is not solely dependent on external validation. When a man derives his confidence from within, rather than from how others respond to him, the fear of rejection loses its grip. He no longer sees silence as the safest option, but rather understands that expressing his emotions, whether they are reciprocated or not, is a sign of strength, not weakness. In the end, the fear of rejection is a universal human experience, but it does not have to dictate one's choices. Silence may feel like the safest option, but in reality it often leads to regret, misconnections, and prolonged uncertainty. By confronting the fear, understanding its roots, and learning to navigate it with courage and self-awareness, men can break free from the cycle of silence and step into relationships with greater clarity and confidence. Men often process challenges differently from women, particularly when it comes to emotional and relational struggles. Many men have been conditioned to believe that facing difficulties, whether personal, professional, or romantic, is something they must do alone. This belief is deeply ingrained, shaped by cultural expectations, upbringing, and even evolutionary instincts. Rather than openly discussing problems or seeking support, a man may retreat into silence, not because he does not care or lacks feelings, but because he perceives it as his responsibility to resolve his struggles independently. This pattern of behavior is not arbitrary, it is reinforced from an early age. Boys are often encouraged to be self-reliant, to be tough, and to find solutions rather than express emotions. A young boy who falls and scrapes his knee might be told to walk it off. A teenager facing disappointment might hear that complaining won't change anything. Over time, these messages accumulate, teaching men that discussing problems, especially emotional ones, is not a productive approach. Instead, they internalize their struggles, believing that it is their duty to handle them privately. As men grow older, this mindset extends into their relationships. When faced with difficulties, be it financial stress, career uncertainty, or unresolved personal trauma, many men instinctively withdraw. They do not necessarily do this because they do not trust or value their partners, but because they feel an obligation to figure things out before involving others. The silence that often follows is not an indication of disinterest, but rather a deeply ingrained habit of self-sufficiency. This withdrawal can be particularly confusing to partners who are more accustomed to verbalizing emotions and working through challenges together. When a woman is faced with stress, she may instinctively reach out to friends or loved ones for support, seeing communication as a means of connection and problem solving. However, when a man experiences stress, he may feel a need to retreat into his thoughts, analyze the situation, and seek a solution internally before speaking about it. The result is a disconnect, one person interpreting silence as distance, while the other sees it as a necessary part of their process. For many men, there is also a fear of burdening others with their problems. If a man is struggling with something significant, such as job insecurity, family pressure, or past emotional wounds, he may worry that discussing it will add unnecessary weight to his relationships. He may believe that sharing his struggles will make him seem weak or incapable. This belief, while often untrue, is one that has been reinforced by generations of societal conditioning. The expectation that a man should have it together and be the provider, protector, and problem solver can create immense pressure, making him hesitant to voice his vulnerabilities. In romantic relationships, this dynamic can be particularly challenging. A man who deeply craves connection may still struggle to open up about his inner battles. His silence is not due to a lack of care, but rather a belief that he must handle his emotions and difficulties on his own before presenting himself as emotionally stable. He might think, "I'll talk about it when I've figured it out," or "I don't want to bring negativity into the relationship." This can lead to prolonged periods of distance, where his partner is left wondering if something is wrong, unaware that his withdrawal is actually a sign that he is struggling. Ironically, this silence can sometimes lead to more problems than the original challenge itself. When a man refuses to communicate his difficulties, his partner may misinterpret his behavior. She may believe that he is disinterested, hiding something, or even losing feelings for her. In reality, he may be doing the opposite, working through his struggles with the hope that once resolved, he can be fully present in the relationship. However, because his partner does not know this, she may react with frustration, concern, or even withdrawal of her own. The cycle continues, leading to unnecessary tension. Breaking this cycle requires both self-awareness and a shift in communication patterns. It is important for men to recognize that vulnerability is not a weakness and that sharing struggles does not diminish their strength. In fact, the ability to communicate openly about challenges is a sign of emotional maturity and resilience. Learning to express emotions in a way that feels natural, without fearing judgment or shame, can lead to stronger and healthier relationships. At the same time, it is also crucial for partners to understand that a man's silence does not always mean apathy or detachment. Recognizing that men may process struggles internally can help create a more patient and supportive environment. Instead of demanding immediate verbal expression, partners can offer reassurance, letting the man know that he is not alone and that his emotions are valid. A simple statement like, "I'm here when you're ready to talk," can be more effective than pressuring him to communicate before he is ready. Additionally, men need to unlearn the idea that they must be fully fixed before they can engage emotionally in a relationship. Growth, healing, and problem solving are ongoing processes, and one does not need to have all the answers before allowing others to be part of the journey. By embracing this mindset, men can cultivate deeper emotional connections, reducing the tendency to retreat into prolonged silence. In the end, the belief that men must navigate their challenges alone is a deeply ingrained but ultimately counterproductive one. While self-reliance is valuable, emotional connection and open communication are equally important. By learning to balance independence with vulnerability, men can foster relationships that are built on trust, understanding, and true emotional intimacy. Silence may feel like the safest option, but real strength lies in the ability to share, connect, and grow together. Silence is often mistaken for indifference, but in many cases it is a sign of deep contemplation and emotional complexity. When a man craves someone yet remains silent, he may be caught in a web of internal conflicts, uncertain about his next move. This hesitation is not necessarily a lack of feeling, but rather an indication that he is weighing multiple factors: his emotions, the possible consequences of his actions, and the way he wants to present himself. Men often struggle with articulating their emotions, not because they do not feel them intensely, but because they fear expressing them incorrectly. Many men have learned through experience or societal conditioning that words carry weight. The wrong words at the wrong time can lead to misunderstandings, rejections, or even embarrassment. As a result, a man who deeply desires someone may hesitate to speak, not because he is indifferent, but because he is uncertain of how to communicate his emotions in a way that aligns with his intentions. Another factor contributing to this hesitation is the fear of being misinterpreted. If a man expresses interest too soon or too intensely, he risks coming across as needy or overly eager. If he underplays his emotions, he might seem distant or disinterested. Striking the right balance is not always easy, and for some men, silence feels like the safer alternative until they are certain about their approach. This internal conflict can create a frustrating paradox. The more he cares, the more he may hesitate to express it, leading to an appearance of detachment rather than desire. This hesitation is further compounded by the influence of past experiences. If a man has previously faced rejection, heartbreak, or emotional manipulation, he may become even more cautious about how and when he reveals his feelings. The mind stores painful experiences as lessons, and if he has been hurt before, his instinct might be to tread carefully, analyzing every interaction to avoid making the same mistakes. This can create a delay in action as he mentally rehearses different outcomes, trying to predict how his words or actions will be received. Men also consider the broader context of their lives when deciding how to express emotions. If he is dealing with personal struggles, whether related to career, finances, or emotional well-being, he may hesitate to pursue a romantic connection until he feels more secure in himself. Many men have been conditioned to believe that they should have their lives figured out before committing emotionally. This, though often unrealistic, leads to self-imposed silence. He may crave someone deeply, but if he feels that his life is not in order, he might choose to remain distant until he believes he has something more stable to offer. Additionally, hesitation can stem from uncertainty about the other person's feelings. If a man is not sure whether his interest is reciprocated, he may hesitate to take a step forward. This is particularly true for men who are risk-averse or who have a strong fear of rejection. Silence, in this case, becomes a way to protect himself from potential disappointment. He may look for subtle cues, trying to decipher signals before making a move, but in the process, he may overanalyze, leading to inaction. Another layer to this hesitation is the pressure to maintain an image of confidence and composure. Many men feel that they must project a certain level of control over their emotions, believing that being too expressive might make them seem weak or overly vulnerable. This belief often stems from cultural narratives that equate masculinity with emotional restraint. The idea that a man should always be in control of his feelings can lead to a struggle between his internal emotions and his external actions. He may want to express himself fully, but feels constrained by the need to appear unshaken. This internal struggle does not mean he does not care. It often means he cares too much. When a man truly craves someone, he wants to get it right. He does not want to ruin a potential connection by acting impulsively or saying something that could be misinterpreted. So he hesitates, running through different scenarios in his mind, trying to determine the best course of action. In the meantime, his silence may be mistaken for disinterest, creating unnecessary distance between him and the person he desires. For many men, overcoming this hesitation requires a shift in perspective. Rather than viewing emotional expression as a high-stakes risk, it can be helpful to see it as a necessary step toward genuine connection. Silence may feel like a form of self-protection, but in reality, it often creates more confusion than clarity. By learning to communicate emotions with honesty and confidence, men can break free from the cycle of hesitation and build deeper, more meaningful relationships. At the same time, it is important for partners to recognize that hesitation does not always mean a lack of interest. Understanding the internal conflicts that may be at play can help create an environment where a man feels safe to express himself without fear of judgment. Encouraging open communication in a way that respects his process can make it easier for him to step out of his silence and into a space of genuine connection. In the end, hesitation is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of depth. It means that a man is thinking, feeling, and considering his actions carefully. However, when hesitation turns into prolonged silence, it can lead to missed opportunities and unnecessary misunderstandings. Learning to balance thoughtfulness with action is key to overcoming this internal struggle and fostering authentic emotional connections. Silence can sometimes be a test, a way for a man to gauge the depth of a woman's interest without directly asking. This is not necessarily a conscious or manipulative act, rather it is often an instinctive way of seeking reassurance and understanding where he stands. When a man craves someone but remains silent, he may be observing how she reacts in his absence. Whether she initiates contact or if she expresses any signs of missing him, this behavior is rooted in a deep-seated need for validation as well as a desire to feel desired. Men, like women, want to be wanted. They want to feel that their presence matters and that their absence is noticed. However, many men struggle with expressing this need openly, as doing so might make them feel vulnerable or exposed. Instead of directly asking, "Do you miss me? Do you care?" they may choose silence as a way to see if the woman will reach out first. If she does, it serves as confirmation that she values the connection. If she does not, he may interpret it as a sign that her feelings are not as strong as his. This, of course, is not always an accurate assumption, but it is one that many men make when they feel uncertain about a relationship. Another reason a man may use silence as a test is because he wants to determine how emotionally invested a woman is. If he has strong feelings but is unsure if they are reciprocated, he may hesitate to express them fully until he has some indication that she feels the same way. By withdrawing slightly, he creates space to observe how she responds. If she moves closer, initiates conversation, or expresses concern over his silence, he takes it as a sign that she is emotionally engaged. If she remains distant, he may assume that she is indifferent, even if that is not the case. This kind of behavior can sometimes stem from past experiences, especially if a man has been in situations where he felt he was the only one making an effort. If he has previously pursued someone who is emotionally unavailable or uninterested, he may develop a habit of testing before investing. Silence, in this case, becomes a defense mechanism, his way of ensuring that he is not setting himself up for disappointment. He wants to avoid chasing someone who is not equally invested, so he steps back to see if she will step forward. This form of testing is also influenced by societal expectations around masculinity and relationships. Many men are taught that they should not be too eager, that they should not reveal their emotions too soon, and that they should let a woman show interest first. These ideas are often reinforced by cultural narratives that depict the hard-to-get dynamic as an effective strategy for building attraction. As a result, a man may hesitate to be the one who always reaches out, fearing that doing so will make him seem too available or less desirable. While this kind of behavior may make sense from a psychological perspective, it can also create unnecessary confusion and miscommunication. A woman who does not understand why a man is suddenly distant may assume he has lost interest, leading her to withdraw as well. This creates a cycle where both people are waiting for the other to make a move, leading to frustration and missed opportunities for deeper connection. There is also a risk that a man who uses silence as a test may misinterpret the results. If a woman does not reach out during his period of withdrawal, it may not be because she is uninterested, but rather because she is uncertain about his feelings. She may also be following social norms that discourage women from being the first to initiate contact. In this way, silence can backfire, creating the exact situation he was hoping to avoid. Both parties thinking the other is indifferent, when in reality both are simply hesitant. For a man to break free from this pattern, he must recognize that direct communication is often more effective than silent testing. Instead of stepping back and waiting for a response, he can take the initiative to express his feelings and seek clarity. A simple conversation can often resolve weeks or even months of uncertainty. Rather than playing a waiting game, he can openly ask, "I care about this connection. Do you feel the same way?" This kind of honesty requires courage, but it also leads to deeper, more authentic relationships. At the same time, it is important for women to understand that a man's silence does not always mean disinterest. In some cases, it is a sign that he is looking for reassurance, uncertain about his place in her life. Recognizing this can help navigate the situation with patience and clarity. If she senses that he has pulled back, a simple message or a direct expression of interest can break the cycle of miscommunication. In the end, silence as a test is often rooted in fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of unreciprocated feelings, and the fear of investing in something uncertain. But real connection cannot be built on fear. It requires openness, vulnerability, and a willingness to communicate without hidden strategies. When both people learn to express their feelings honestly, the need for silent testing disappears, and what remains is a foundation of trust and mutual understanding. When a man craves someone but remains silent, it is often because he is struggling with his own self-worth. His silence is not about the other person, but about himself, his doubts, his insecurities, and his internal battles. Many men hesitate to express their emotions not because they lack feeling, but because they do not feel worthy of the connection they desire. This internal struggle can be deeply rooted, shaped by past experiences, societal expectations, and personal fears. A man who doubts his value may fear that he does not measure up to what he believes his partner deserves. He may look at himself, his career, his financial situation, his emotional stability, and feel inadequate. He might think, "What do I have to offer? Am I enough?" Instead of reaching out and risking rejection, he withdraws, convincing himself that his silence is better than facing the possibility of being told he is not enough. This hesitation is often reinforced by personal history. If he has faced rejection in the past, if he has been made to feel unworthy by family, society, or past relationships, he may develop a tendency to preemptively remove himself from situations where he fears he might fail. Men are often taught to equate their worth with their achievements, their financial stability, and their ability to provide. When they feel they do not meet these standards, they may hesitate to pursue relationships, believing that they must fix themselves before they are deserving of love. This belief can lead to prolonged silence, not because they do not crave connection, but because they are waiting for the moment when they feel they have become good enough. The irony is that this moment rarely arrives. The standard they set for themselves keeps shifting, making them feel as though they will never be truly ready. Silence in this case is not rejection, but self-protection. It is easier to stay quiet than to risk exposing vulnerabilities. Many men struggle to express feelings of self-doubt because they believe they should always appear strong and confident. To admit insecurity feels like admitting failure. They fear that if they reveal their inner struggles, they will be seen as weak, unworthy, or unappealing. So they choose silence, hoping that by keeping their struggles hidden, they can maintain an image of control. This internal battle can create confusion for their partners. A woman may see a man pulling away and assume he is losing interest, when in reality he is simply questioning whether he deserves to be in the relationship at all. He may love deeply but feel unworthy of love in return. This contradiction, deep desire paired with deep insecurity, leads to emotional paralysis. He wants to act, but convinces himself that he should not. He wants to reach out, but fears he has nothing valuable to offer. Breaking free from this pattern requires a shift in mindset. A man must learn to separate his worth from external achievements. He must recognize that he is deserving of love and connection, not because of what he provides, but because of who he is. This is not an easy realization. It requires unlearning years of conditioning that equates worth with success, strength, and emotional restraint. It requires understanding that vulnerability is not weakness, but a sign of courage and authenticity. Men must also challenge the belief that they must be perfect before they can engage in meaningful relationship. No one reaches a point of absolute readiness. Growth is continuous, and love is not reserved only for those who have everything figured out. By waiting for an unattainable sense of worthiness, they risk missing out on deep and meaningful connections in the present. The truth is, relationships are not built on perfection, but on mutual support, trust, and the willingness to grow together. For partners of men who struggle with self-worth, patience and understanding are key. Recognizing that his silence is not a sign of indifference, but of inner struggle, can change the way the situation is approached. Instead of assuming disinterest, creating an open and non-judgmental space for communication can help him feel safe enough to express his fears. A simple acknowledgement, I see you, I value you, and you don't have to be perfect to be loved, can be incredibly powerful. In the end, silence rooted in self-doubt is one of the most painful forms of hesitation because it is self-imposed. The man who craves connection but remains silent is not waiting for the right moment. He is waiting for a version of himself that he believes is worthy of love. But love is not something earned through achievement. It is something that thrives in openness, vulnerability, and shared experiences. The moment he realizes this is the moment he frees himself from his silence and steps fully into the relationships he has always desired. The silence of a man who craves but does not act is not meaningless. It is layered with internal struggles, fears, and deeply ingrained beliefs. It is not always rejection, nor is it always indifference. Instead, it is often a reflection of his own hesitations, insecurities, and the weight of societal expectations. Whether he is overwhelmed by emotion, unsure of his next move, testing the depth of interest, or questioning his own worth, his silence speaks volumes about his inner world. Understanding this silence requires patience, empathy, and communication. Rather than assuming his distance means disinterest, it is worth considering the complexities at play. Does he hesitate out of fear of rejection? Is he battling personal insecurities? Is he uncertain about the other person's feelings? Or is he waiting for a sign that it is safe to step forward? Recognizing these possibilities creates space for clarity rather than confusion. But ultimately, silence, no matter how well-intentioned, can become a barrier to connection. Real relationships are built not on unspoken feelings, but on shared vulnerability, mutual effort, and the willingness to engage. A man who craves someone must learn that waiting in silence rarely brings the resolution he seeks. Fear, hesitation, and uncertainty may feel like valid reasons to hold back, but in the end, the only way to truly connect is to step forward, take the risk, and embrace the possibility of love, even in the face of doubt.